My name is Manuel and today I want to talk about the first steps to learn a new programming language. Obviously, at the end of this video you won't be able to do very complex stuff like a game or a neural network, but you will be able to interact with the user and print something on the screen, for example, and then build on that. Another big point is that all these things that I will talk about won't be able to be applied to descriptive languages. So what's the difference between a descriptive language and a programming language? A descriptive language like HTML is used to describe how a web page is supposed to be shown. Like, I want this menu on the top, I want this picture on the center of the page. A programming language tells the computer to do stuff, like mathematical operations, matrix stuff. So I challenge you to choose a language that you want to learn right now. Then, just follow my instructions step by step. At each step, just stop the video and try to do what I suggest. Have you chosen? Okay, let's start. Step 1. What's the main function? The main function is the starting point of your program. Each language wants it defined in a different way. For example, C wants it defined as main, open bracket, close bracket. Java 2, sometimes you don't need to, like Python. Okay, search it now on the internet. What's the main function for blah 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 blah? And then write it down. You can write it down on any text editor you want. I don't know, Notepad, it's okay for now. Sometimes the language doesn't really have a main function. Think about JavaScript. JavaScript is a language that gives behavior to a web page. So, for example, you have a button and you want that something happens when you click the button. So the starting point of your code will be the event of when you click the button. Step number 2. How to define a variable. Variables are like one of the basic things in any programming language. A variable is something that can contain a value. For example, in C, you can define an integer variable named x as int x. And from that point on, x can only have or be assigned integer values. So for example, if you try to copy a string in x, boom, the program will just crash, everything will go down and oh my god, no, what have I done? Something like that, really. But in other languages like Python or JavaScript, they do not care. You can put anything you want in there. And maybe you're asking yourself, why do I need variables? Well, let's say that maybe you want to get some information for the user and you want to have it somewhere. Well, you need variables for that. Okay, now I challenge you. Search it and try to find or define a variable in your program. Step 3. How do I call a function? Well, you just usually have to write it down by its name and then it's called essentially. And you should pay attention to the parameter it requires, the order and also the type of the parameters. Maybe you're asking yourself, what functions are useful for? Why should I have them? And what's a parameter? A function is a piece of code with a name on it. So instead of writing 10 times the same instructions, you put them in a function and then you just call it whenever you need them. A function usually has parameters or input values. The output or result of the function is supposed to depend on these parameters. And if it doesn't at all, well, these parameters are pretty useless. Okay, so right now try to call a function. Try to print something on the screen like hello world. And if you did, well, maybe you're wondering something like, where is this print function defined? And if you were able to call it, where does it come from? This brings me directly to the next step. Step 4. How can I import libraries or modules? Well, the real question is that how can I use the code of someone else? And let's not consider the problem related to licensing. Let's just put it there, okay? Let's not consider that. So libraries and modules are essentially the code of someone else, and they contain general purpose functions and code that are very useful for developers, and they avoid to write some basic stuff from scratch every time, and usually are much more efficient than what you would have written. So let's go back to the print function. Maybe you're wondering, where does it come from? Well, it comes from a library that you might have to include, or maybe it's already included in the language itself. Like in C, you have to include the stdio.h library, which stands for Standard Input and Output Library. And in Python, you don't have to do anything because it's already there, like it's included in the package, in the Python package. You just print and then the text you want to print, and you just do it. Okay, so now in your program, try to ask something to the user and then print into the screen. Maybe you'll need some kind of function that is called scan or read. Try to look it up on the internet. So maybe you wrote all the program and now you're wondering, so what do I do next? Like, how do I tell the computer to do this stuff? Step number 5. How do I run it? Depending on the language, you probably have to do different kind of stuff. Like if you have a program in C, you have to first compile, then link, then you have an executable that you can launch from the command line, for example. If you use Java, first you have to create like a class file or something like this. Sometimes you don't need to do anything like Python. You just write Python and the name of the file with your code, and it just executes everything. So the basic simple way is to use the command line. You probably need to download and install some tools to compile or create, I don't know, the class file. Just do it. Follow all the instructions that you can find on the internet for the language that you have chosen. So the command line is usually okay for a small program with 1 or 2, 3 files, no more. With bigger projects, you probably want to use Anita, which is a program that will help you organize all your files in directories, folders, and then create an executable or run your program with just one click. Well, that's it. No more steps. At this point, you should be able to do something very basic with the language that you have chosen. So I really push you to keep going with your program and make it more awesome, okay? And I think in a couple of weeks you should be already able to do really intermediate level stuff. So don't stop, okay? So I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one where I try to answer the question, can chickens actually fly?